So on to our final section of this part of the event before we take another break, which is another case study. Sustainability is integral to BBC and CBC. Now, the sustainability journey presents new ways of thinking and doing as it becomes integral to how we work. In this session, we're going to hear from the BBC, who have years of experience now on working on sustainability, and the CBC Radio Canada, who have recently embarked on their journey. And we saw a great video from them at the top of our event today. So I'm going to hand over to the capable hands of Andy Rayner, who is going to moderate the session. Over to you, Andy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. It's been a great few hours. I've enjoyed listening to a lot of the sessions that have gone on previously. So thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. So I'd like to introduce you. Oh, actually, I'm going to let my esteemed panel introduce themselves to you. So first of all, from where I'm sitting in sunny Suffolk on the east side of the UK, we're going to hop over to, is it sunny Canada today or not? Athena, introduce yourself, please.
It's a beautiful day in Canada. So my name is Athena Tristalis. I'm the Senior Manager of Environmental Sustainability with CBC Radio Canada. And I'm located here in Toronto. It's a beautiful day. And I'm excited to be part of this panel. So for those who aren't familiar with CBC Radio Canada, we are Canada's national public broadcaster. I've been with the corporation for over 15 years, and I led the development of our strategy, Greening Our Story, as well as the implementation and the actionable items associated with that and beyond the strategy itself.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much. And a little bit closer to home for me, that I think slightly north of where I am, depending on where he's located today. Jeff, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Andy. Hi, everybody. Hi, Athena. Thanks for inviting me to join today. So I'm Jeff Wolfe. I live up in the North Yorkshire in the north of England, and I work for the BBC, which I'm guessing most of you have heard of, public service broadcaster, global reach of 500 million. I've been in media technology since 1985. I moved into innovation and projects in 97. But my sustainability journey started when I had 5 very enjoyable years at the Natural History Museum as a special effects engineer, where I was responsible for the ecology gallery, the dinosaur gallery, and the famous life-size model of a blue whale. And that's when I really began to understand the importance of trying to protect our planet. And I live in a very rural location, and that's kind of continued. I really feel quite connected to the environment through that. In terms of my role, my substantive role is running a team of project managers. But from last May last year, I took on this role to lead for sustainability for technology for the BBC. So it's a new role. And I represent all parts of technology. So, laptops, PCs, Wi-Fi, studios, networks, etc. But also the products. So our software products, iPlayer sounds, and also our distribution contracts, getting our services to the audience. So that's about, give you a kind of a scale of the operation. It's about 3,500 colleagues, and it's a 9-digit budget. So that's, and I represent, I'm the only full-time person of staff on sustainability from that group. So that's me.
Wow, thank you. I've got these pictures of dinosaurs with Jeff in my mind now. And also 1985, well, you must have started when you were about 10 years old. Well, very good. Right. Okay.
Not far off.
So Athena, let me come to you. What I'd like to do with both of you is initially explore what your organizations have been doing thus far to date, and some of the sustainability thinking initiatives that you've been working through. And then after that, we'll start to explore, what plans you've got moving forward. But maybe, Athena, you can give us a bit of an update on, what's been happening in CBC and what the initiatives have been going on so far.
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, in June of 2021, we actually launched our new sustainability strategy focused on the environment, and we called it Greening Our Story. And the mission that we wanted was to build an environmentally sustainable public service media organization that the current and future generations could be proud of. Our long-term vision is to embed sustainable thinking in all that we do. But our journey did not start in 2021. Our journey started well before 2008, when we actually published our first environmental report, and it's available on our corporate site. You could see the evolution of our environmental program and how we evolved into sustainability over the course of the last 12 to 13 years. The strategy was developed over COVID, over the 2020 period that most of us were working from home. All of us are still technically working from home if we're from the virtual perspective. And we based it on 4 specific pillars. The first pillar was basically producing sustainably, and it's focused on the core operations of our organization. Our focus is to be industry leaders in promoting sustainable production in Canada. Ultimately, that's our goal. The second pillar that we created, that we focus on as part of our strategy, is called a light footprint. And basically, it goes to the fundamental core of what sustainability is and decarbonizing our business, looking at our activities, looking at the operations, looking at our processes, and looking at how we can get to net zero by 2050. Scripting a new path was our third pillar, and that is really focused on that the vision of the strategy and embedding sustainable thinking in all that we do, looking at our processes, our procedures, changing our policies, engaging with our internal and external stakeholders, basically embedding the language that we need into the processes, and how we're going to be moving forward as an organization. And then finally, our focus was, how are we going to shape that narrative? How are we going to be transparent with our reporting and be accountable for our behaviors, for our activities? How are we going to focus on the impact of the organization as a whole in terms of telling our story, and the challenges, the opportunities and the challenges that we've identified as part of that, as part of the strategy itself. So we've come a long way. It's been 2 years now that we've put the strategy in place, and we've had a lot of different initiatives that we've implemented to support each of those pillars. I don't know if you want me to go into that now or if you want me to save that for later. I'll save it for now. I mean, that's going to be part of the update.
Yeah. Just one general question for you.
Sure.
What has the general reaction been within your colleagues in terms of the approach to these initiatives thus far?
So when we were developing the strategy, we actually completed an employee engagement survey on the inside of the organization. We didn't look external at this point in time. We just did an internal assessment. And it was clear that over 90% of our employees wanted us to focus on an environmental sustainability strategy. So the desire was there. We formed a sustainability steering committee, of which I'm the chair, and it's made up of cross-functional representation. So there's a person from every aspect of our organization sitting at that table. And the desire to do better, the desire to be those industry leaders and embed sustainable thinking in our processes is there. We have achieved quite a bit through that desire and that engagement. We formed green teams at the local level, at the business level, and there's the push to get the strategy implemented. Our employees are engaged in the process, and it's hard to engage and implement cultural change, but I see a huge change in the organization since we've implemented the strategy.
Wow, that's very encouraging. Thank you very much. Right, Jeff, over to you. So maybe you could bring us up to date. I know the BBC has been working on various elements of sustainability for a fair while now, but maybe you can bring us up to date really on the initiatives and some of the processes and thinking that the BBC has got thus far.
Yeah, sure. So a quick explanation of the structure of sustainability and how it's managed within the BBC. So there is a group level sustainability team led by the BBC's Director of Sustainability, Danielle Mulder. They look after the group level aspects. So that's like the disclosure, the reporting, setting policies and strategies. So they set that kind of, and they lead on some of the corporate-wide initiatives, like, for example, we recently secured funding to convert a number of BBC properties from gas boilers to heat pumps, and electrifying the BBC's vehicle fleet and things like that. Within each of the divisions, there's people like me, so there's about 3 or 4 of us in each of the big pillars, like sport, news, technology, content, who deliver initiatives on the ground, as it were, and that's what I'm focusing on. So there's 4 big initiatives in which I'm leading. One is around supply chain engagement, because exactly 80% of technology's carbon footprint comes from our supply chain. And more importantly, 60% of that, of the overall carbon footprint, comes from just 6 vendors, our big technology suppliers. So I focused on one-to-one conversations with them about their carbon strategy, getting them to report on their carbon footprint and tracking and reporting on that, and training up our commercial my colleagues in our commercial department who manage those big contracts as well, and tooling them up so they can actually have those conversations. Second one is around decarb level agreement. And that's something we've initiated within technology, and I'm pleased to say has been taken up and is now being applied on a pan BBC basis, which is for all our high value contracts. They will now include a contracted carbon reduction plan. Works best for a service type contract where you say, right, on day one of the service, day one of the contract, carbon footprint of X. By the end of the contract in year 5 or 7, whatever it might be, we want to see that at 20, 25, 30% lower. Pleased to say the first one of those contracts has gone out. It was a finance contract, not a technology contract. So that's now a real thing. The third strand is toughening up the sustainability approvals for all financial investments, technology financial investments, just to be clear. Now sustainability is mandatory, and the team presenting the case, and the team preparing the business case need to state the carbon footprint of what they're proposing to do, comparing it to what's gone before, and stating the carbon reduction that they're going to achieve. And the last one is very, very prosaic, but something which is really, really important, is how to switch stuff off when it's not in use. It's a bit embarrassing. I put my hand up. I've designed studios and facilities and so on before in previous roles, and I've never ever thought about how to switch it off. I will put my hand up and say that. So we're working on a project which is to retrofit to existing studios technology where you can switch it off. And of course, this audience will know switching it off is the easy bit. Switching it on so it comes up and it still works is the really hard bit without an engineer having to intervene. So we're working on a solution to do that. Only funded to do a couple of studios, but if we can prove we can do it, then the idea is to roll it out across the rest of the corporation. So those are the 4 big ticket in-flight projects at the moment.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very, very much. That whole turning stuff off, I know exactly what you mean. I look back at my career for the last 30 years and think, Flip, why didn't we think of actually doing that, just as a ground up thing right from day zero? But we are now, even in my company and organization, focusing on those kind of things as well. So yeah, it's once you actually have the mindset, you can actually deliver a lot of these things. Athena, back to you. First of all, in case anyone's interested and you haven't got the chat up, Athena has very usefully posted a link to the CBC greening our story stuff. So if you want to actually look at some of the resources that CBC have got in the public domain online, then do follow that link and join in. That will be great. Athena, back to you. You mentioned those 4 pillars, and you mentioned there are some initiatives resulting from that. I don't know whether you could just spend a few minutes unpacking some or highlighting some of those. That would be very useful.
Absolutely. So if I begin again back to the first pillar, producing sustainably. We've done one of the key targets that we have under this pillar is to ensure that we're measuring our production related emissions. And this is something that we had never done prior to this strategy. So what we did was using the Albert tool with the international calculator, we mandated the use of Albert. With a target of 100% of our in-house productions using the calculator by 2026. And for those who aren't familiar, we actually operate in 2 different markets. We have the English market as well as the French market in Canada. So from an English services perspective, we mandated the use of the calculator as of January 1st of 2023, where 100% of all content, including independents and in-house productions, would be using the calculator. From the French services perspective, we broke that up based on budget. And what we've done is we're focusing on over the course of the next couple of fiscal years, based on what the budget of that particular production is and the requirement that they produce the carbon calculation. For productions that do not require the carbon calculation, we are asking for a sustainability plan, because we still have the expectation that they'll look at what their processes are and how they're going to implement sustainable thinking in the development of their production. Another really exciting new initiative that was actually just announced a couple of weeks ago, maybe 10 days ago, was related to the target that we have of advancing sustainable production in the Canadian industry. So we've been working very closely with other Canadian broadcasters, Canadian funders, independent producers. But earlier this month, we actually announced in conjunction with 21 other Canadian broadcasters, we formed the Canadian Broadcasters for Sustainability. And the group is really committed to working together to increase environmentally sustainable change within the broadcasting industry in Canada. So this is really important, because it's the first time that any public or private broadcasters in Canada have come together across the linguistic and regional markets towards a common goal. So it's really exciting, and it's a new idea that we're all working together towards this common purpose. So it's really important from that perspective. We've done other initiatives related to the pillar as well, working closely with the media industry, partnering with the Quebec Film and Television Council in our French networks, partnering with the Sustainable Production Forum, and working with different organizations to create tools and resources to support the pillar itself and the sustainable production that we're working towards. If I go to the second pillar and I give another really great example, we've done a lot of different initiatives in terms of decarbonizing our business, implementing upgrades to our heating and cooling systems, energy audits, thermal scans, optimizing our HVAC systems. But another initiative that we implemented earlier this year was the installation of solar panels at 2 of our transmission sites, one in New Brunswick and one in Ontario. And so these 2 projects were pilots, and we successfully were able to transition these 2 sites to carbon neutral. So it's exciting to be able to see that by implementing this program that we're covering 100% of our energy costs. And we are exploring other transmission sites as a result of this. On the third pillars, from the third pillar's perspective, the bulk of our initiatives have come through our procurement processes, and looking at the relationships that we're building under that scope 3 evaluation, because 87% of our overall footprint is related to our procured goods and services, our scope 3 and our procured goods and services. We hired a dedicated resource focusing on sustainable procurement. We've begun to include sustainability criteria in our RFP processes with the intention of promoting products with a lower carbon footprint and working with vendors that are sustainable. We surveyed our vendors, our top 50 vendors across different categories and spend, to better understand their involvement in sustainability. We've updated our policies and our procedures. We're actually going to be rolling out a vendor code of conduct and a directive on sustainable procurement later this summer. And so there's quite a bit happening on the sustainable procurement side, supporting that particular pillar as an example. And then the final example I can give as it relates to the fourth pillar is, the publication of a brand new sustainability report that came out last November. But the fact that we will be reporting on TCFD, so the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, we completed our first report, and it will be published later this fall. And it's exciting because of the fact of the amount of work that had to go into that document for our first disclosure. Oh, and I did forget one thing that I do want to mention. We, as part of the second year anniversary of the launch of our strategy a couple of weeks ago, we announced that we are joining Environment and Climate Change Canada's Net Zero Challenge. So our long-term goal is to be a net zero by 2050. And so we're on that path. And it's an exciting initiative as it relates to the transparency and accountability of the work that we're doing. So we've been busy. I know
Wow.
I've given a lot of examples in that short period of time. There's a lot more. And I mean, they're all in our annual report.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much. Just to say to everyone that's listening, if you've got any burning questions, do please type them in. I do think we may be able to make a little bit of use of a slight overrun on this session because we're going into a break. So although we'll formally finish at hour, we might spend a few more minutes if anyone has got any questions that we haven't managed to get through. So I'll encourage anyone that's got any questions or observations they'd like to throw in to actually put them in. It strikes me from what both of you have said so far in this conversation that the supply chain, the upstream supply chain, is such a vital, because of the size of it in terms of proportion of your carbon footprint, is such a vital element. So it's been interesting to see what you were talking about there, Athena. Jeff, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what the BBC are thinking of, or even already doing, in terms of moving forward with the thinking on incentivizing suppliers, or even mandating suppliers to be green and moving forwards?
Yeah, sure. So it's happening at two levels, basically. So the group level are working on a supply chain charter, which would set out the expectations of the BBC from all our suppliers, not just tech suppliers, but all our suppliers into the BBC. And to be clear, sometimes the word supplier can be misleading. It's anyone we're spending money with, because sometimes it can be upstream and downstream, but wherever we're spending money. So they're working on that at the moment, and they are putting forward, and it's going through the approval mangle, a set of strategies and policies around that charter. And so that's work in progress. So the supply chain engagement, particularly in the tech community, which I'm guessing the audience for this conference will be most interested in, is being led by myself. There we started approximately a year ago on eking out from within our those top 6 suppliers, and typical scope creep, that became 7. But the top 7 suppliers, setting up routine monthly conversations with their lead person for sustainability in their organization, ascertaining with them what the carbon footprint is for the services that they provide to the BBC under the contract or contracts that we have with them. And that's been for some vendors more of a challenge than for others. Others were quite geared up for that and we came quickly to a way of an agreed methodology of calculating that. Others, it was a bit more complex. But what I'm really pleased about is, because of all the existing contracts, although sustainability may have a mention, it's not actually a contracted deliverable. So they've all engaged really well, because they could just say, this is not part of your contract, beggar off. But they've all realised that this is something they need to be a part of and want to be a part of and work with us, which has been great. Some of their carbon accounting maturity is a bit variable. Some were more ready for the kind of questions we were asking than others and could provide data more quickly. And those that haven't, I'm really pleased to say they really engaged. They're working on getting resources so that they can do their carbon accounting to the kind of levels that we've been asking of them. So it's been really encouraging. And the really good news story is all of the vendors have carbon reduction plans in place, and with the data that we've been collecting, admittedly there are gaps in the data, as I explained. Some are particularly around scope 3. The level of maturity around scope 3 is quite variable. Some very good, some just starting their journey in terms of their scope 3 data. But the encouraging story is, with the data we've got, acknowledging that there's gaps, that it is trending downwards for all of them. So they are on or thereabouts the kind of carbon reduction plan that we wanted to achieve, which is a really great story. And the next part of that, as I mentioned very briefly, is I'm working with to skill up the commercial management team who manage these big value contracts, so that they can then start having these dialogues and start to add sustainability amongst all the other KPIs and SLAs that they track and report on these contracts, and working with them to get them to the point where they can have those conversations without me or someone from the group sustainability team being in on the meeting and guiding them on the kind of responses we'd expect from the vendor. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It's taken a long time, but so far, and fingers crossed, the story is a relatively good one.
Yeah. Thank you very much. One quick question, Jeff, following on from that, and I'll open up to either of you if you want to comment. I think we've heard this earlier on today in some of the sessions and also at previous sustainability events, is the concern over the integrity or the accuracy of measurability. Have either of you got any concerns or experience on how that should work moving forward, and how it has or hasn't worked thus far? As in, are you measuring what you think you're measuring, or is there some degree of not necessarily greenwashing but green hiding, or whatever the term might be?
I can begin if you'd like, Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Go, Athena.
So this is one of the challenges that we have as an organization as a whole, and I think it's a challenge that every organization has, truly, because when we developed completed our baseline as per the greenhouse gas protocol, and we looked at our scopes 1, 2, and 3. There's only 15 categories under scope 3, and there's pieces that aren't included there that I haven't yet figured out how we're going to fit that in there. Because if we're looking at the acquisitions of our independent productions or streaming services, or even something as simple as working from home, technically that's not there. And we really should be including that as part of our scope 3 calculations. So I know that there are some changes coming. I don't know what the timeline is. I haven't had the opportunity to go into a lot more detail in terms of looking at that, but there are pieces that aren't included, and it's critical that when we're reporting, that we're as transparent as possible and explaining that this piece is not included at this point in time and the reasons why. I don't want to introduce the independent production piece because I'm not confident in the methodology yet. And I'm still trying to figure that piece of it out. And until I do, and I feel confident, I think that it's important that we're upfront and we explain why. So there are pieces that are missing, unfortunately, but I think it's critical that we're as transparent as possible.
Very good, thank you. Jeff, have you got anything to add from the BBC?
Yeah, no, completely. And I think, let's start with the easy bit. So scope 1 and scope 2, you just look at the bills, and there's internationally recognized ways of converting, liters of oil, liters of gas, gallons of petrol into a carbon footprint, and that's internationally recognized. Electricity, similarly, you look up the location of where you are, you're in London, electricity carbon footprint per kilowatt hour for the last year is X, and you just turn that into a carbon footprint. That's very straightforward and very simple, and very easy to ascertain. Scope 3 is a real challenge because there's so much variability about it. Scope 3 is this kind of like everything else scope, 15 categories, as Athena mentioned. And it's probably worth remembering that these are defined by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and that was written in 2001. And it was written very much with the lens of I am a car manufacturer in mind, and this is how you would calculate your carbon footprint. Not all aspects of it translate very well into the media business, and I think we've got to realize that. A good example is around end user equipment. So if you're thinking about the equipment that the audience are using to watch and listen to our products, technically that's outside the boundary of the BBC's carbon footprint. So, for example, what the greenhouse gas says is it's the manufacturer of the device, whether it be an iPad, laptop, telly, a radio. They are responsible for reporting the downstream use of that product and the in-service use of the product. So that's their carbon footprint. But yet we found from some projects that we've led on that For example, we recently reduced the intensity of the graphic used when you're listening to radio through the television, which you can do in the UK. I don't know whether you can do that abroad, I don't know. But on our terrestrial and satellite television services, you can listen to the radio through your television, BBC radio, which is kind of weird. It happens a lot. I do it a lot when I'm in hotel rooms. I've got the radio on all the time, but that's the telly. And we reduced the intensity of that graphic, and we estimated that if you look at all the various devices from OLED to LED to plasma, the average savings about 1 watt per device. But if you aggregate that across the entirety of the radio audience of the BBC, that comes to 200, or the electrical equivalent of 200 houses taken off the UK national grid, just by making the graphic a little bit less bright. And that's a very conservative estimate. More optimistic estimates, it's an even larger number. But yet that carbon footprint is outside of the scope of our reporting, but we directly impacted that impact on the audience. So yeah, scope 3 is really difficult. I could talk for scope 3 about how we measure the carbon footprint of our supply chain probably for another half an hour, which you probably don't want, Andy, because it is a hot topic, and it does cause a lot of debate internally as well. But I think the way I'm approaching it is consistency. So you've agreed a methodology with one supplier, just use that year on year on year, so that you can say, right, in year 1 it's that, and start to track it down. It's when you start moving between methodologies, then that's clearly, you're going to be onto hiding to nothing there.
Yeah, just a reminder for everyone that both Jeff and Athena have very usefully posted a few of the key highlights textually from some of the key points that we've made in the chat window. So if you want to actually take a look at them, please do so. I'm very aware we've exceeded our time budget by 3 minutes now. So thank you very, very much, Athena and Jeff, for your excellent input. It's fantastic. Lovely to talk again. And hopefully maybe we can revisit this at some point in the future and do another update and see how we're getting on. But so thank you, Canada. Thank you, UK. And thank you, everybody, again. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.